Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Strange Dominions, and I am your host, Octavian Graves. Tonight, I speak with Alex, who has experienced the Boo Hag and other strange phenomena. If you have seen something weird, strange, or unusual, such as a cryptid, a ghost, aliens, or anything in between, send us an email at strangedominionspodcast@gmail.com. That is strangedominionspodcast@gmail.com, and you can be a guest on the show. I really enjoyed talking with Alex, and I think you are really going to enjoy our discussion. So without further ado, here is Alex with the Boo Hag. We are here with Alex. How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Now, I first heard you on Strange Familiars. I don't remember what the number, like the episode number was, but it was just called the Boo Hag. And you had told Timothy about some of these weird dreams you were having.
Right.
And that really perked my interest because in the work that I've been doing and some of the people that I've interviewed about their magical experiences and their magical practice, one of the things that there seems to be a very strong link between the occult and the paranormal is dreams, and I guess maybe the certain kind of dreams that people have and things like that. So let's get into it. When was the Boo Hag dream? How long ago was that?
Let's see here. That one is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 years ago now.
All right. And so do you want to just go ahead and just tell it from the top?
Yeah, sure.
And then we can kind of go into it afterwards.
Should I talk about the instance before with the, I'll call it the waking paralysis. It wasn't really sleep paralysis.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Everything everything that's regarding the dreams, I want to hear about.
All right. So, the first thing that happened, I want to say it was a few months before the actual hag encounter, but basically what happened was I woke up in my room. I sat up because back in those days, those were my young days, and party a lot. So I'd wake up and look around to just try and figure out where I was. I woke up, sat up, looked around, saw I was in my room, and I went to go lay back down because I like to just, lay down for like a minute or two to wake up. And as I was laying back down, I turned my head to my right side, which I have there was a wall on my right side of my bed. My bed was in a corner, so wall on the right, window at the head of my bed. And so the light coming from my window through the blinds kind of was making these lines, was making this line on the wall. So it's like the border where there's the shadow from inside my room, the light coming from outside of my room. And as I'm laying back down, I turn my head and I look at that line right there where it's the wall with the shadow and the light. And so I get like stuck, like I'm halfway laying down and I'm stuck, like I can't move. And I was just like completely paralyzed, and I'd heard of sleep paralysis before. It was something that was kind of interesting to me. So there was kind of like that thought that it was something similar, and it was really weird. But, I obviously wasn't asleep. I was awake when it happened. And it was like this kind of weird panicky feeling. And I couldn't move, and I couldn't move. And I finally managed to pull my eyes away to the left. And after I'm able to move my eyes away, which I'd been trying to do for a while, I finally am able to move my body again. And so I sit back up, I'm freaked out a little bit, and I'm kind of, recollecting myself. And I was like, wow, that was really, really weird. But, I said it was just like, some weird human brain glitch or something. And I was like, well, that's never going to happen again. It was kind of crazy. And I go to lay back down, and I have like this little voice in the back of my head that is like, look there again. And I end up giving into that voice, and I look there again, and I get paralyzed a second time trying to lay down, except this time I had this weird feeling that when I was looking at this line, between the shadow from my room and the light from outside, that I had this weird feeling that I was looking at something, and there was something there telling me that I wasn't seeing it. And I just got that feeling, and it was like the panic like before, but it was even more intense. And it was like I describe it like almost like a like primal, dread. It's like the programming in your brain is going panic, panic, panic. And it just had this feeling I couldn't shake. There was something right there that I was seeing telling me I couldn't see it. And so eventually, again, after struggling to move, I'm able to pull my eyes away to the left. And, I'm finally able to pull my eyes away and I move again and I just kind of get out of there. And that was really freaky because, like I said, I'd heard of sleep paralysis. I knew about it. I'd never had sleep paralysis. But it kind of seemed like that, except I also, from what I've heard, and I don't know how true this is, but when you have sleep paralysis, you can move your eyes. I've heard both you can and can't, so I'm not completely sure, but
I think it
whatever
depends
was
on
happening,
like
I just
how
completely could not move.
I've heard that as well, and I've never experienced sleep paralysis. I've had 3 people who've experienced sleep paralysis where they thought the entity was me for some reason. They when they saw it, they just recognized it as me. Like it didn't look like me, but just kind of like they thought it was me. But I've never had sleep paralysis, so but I have heard that in some cases you can move your eyes, in some cases they're completely transfixed and you have no control over them.
Right. But yes, that was the first thing that happened before that, and I feel like it was related. It was just really, really bizarre.
Yeah,
But
I can definitely understand that.
yeah. Um, so a few months later, I want to say it was a few months later. It was within the year, so it was probably just a few months later, maybe 6 months at most. But I, at that point, had rearranged my room, so now my bed is no longer with my head to the window. It's sort of in the opposite, or not the opposite corner, but if you go down the wall that was on my right, and then you turn the bed like kind of at a 90-degree angle. That's kind of how it was. And so I'm laying there, I'm asleep, and weird dreams are pretty normal for me, and I do mean like really weird. But so I'm dreaming, and I'm kind of looking at my body, and I'm looking at my body simultaneously from like all possible angles, which kind of like is hard to imagine and kind of doesn't make sense, but I guess that's like kind of normal for dreams anyway.
Yeah. But I think I can kind of understand what you mean by being able to see yourself from every angle, like simultaneously. It is hard to
Yeah,
explain, but I that sounds like something that I've experienced too, so I can understand that.
right. So I'm, kind of looking at myself, and after a while, I I'm kind of like tossing and turning, and I see myself kind of tossing and turning, and I open my eyes, and I'm in my body again, or I'm in my body now, but I'm still asleep. Um, I have layered dreams a lot, so it's kind of a thing that happens to me. Like I try to force myself to open my eyes to wake up, but sometimes I just go into the next layer. So I open my eyes and I'm still asleep, and they're in my body now, and I'm like kind of feel myself turning. Something feels wrong, and I don't remember how many times I opened my eyes. I know it happened like at least twice, but I want to say I opened them again, and I saw this time this kind of like hag like woman floating over me, and like the weird skin that's like on the verge of rotting, and like the clothing looks all worn and whatnot, and she's just floating over me, and she reaches her hand inside of my face, and she starts pulling back, and she starts pulling out what looks like a spectral like ghost image of me. uh and I can see like this ghost me getting pulled out of my face. And as she's doing it, it's that like primal dread sense, where your brain's just going panic, panic.
Right.
And she stops, like she's still holding on to me, but she stops pulling. And she kind of looks in my eyes, and you can see this like sort of realization goes on in her eyes, that she realizes that I can see her. And she just like switches and looks like completely, enraged and angry about it, and just starts screaming at me. And for a little bit, I still had that, that panic, that horrible panic. And at some point, it was like a switch flipped. And instead of panic, I was just furious. Like I was completely enraged. And I just started screaming back at it. And it felt like as I was screaming back at it, I was pouring that rage into it. And it was like just this weird sense that it was it fed on the fear, and then when it turned into anger and I just poured that much of it into it, like I felt like I was overloading it. And I don't know why, but that was the feeling I got. And so after a few seconds, like it no longer looks angry and stops screaming, and it gets this look on its face like it's scared of me now. And it lets go of me, and it starts flying off towards my bedroom door, which is a direct line from like the foot of my bed to the door. And so it starts flying off. I open my eyes again, and I'm awake now. Like I'm fully awake. I don't wake up again, but my eyes were already open. Like, when you wake up, you can feel your eyes opening.
Yeah.
Like that didn't happen. My eyes were already open. So when I say I opened my eyes, like in my dreams, I opened my eyes. But then when I was fully awake in reality, like my eyes were already open.
Okay.
So I wake up, I sit up, and on the wall, I can see this shadow going across the wall that would match where the hag was last before I woke up. So like, if she's going towards my door and the light's coming in from the window, it's casting a shadow, like where that shadow is, it matches where she would have been casting it. And it kind of moves all the way along my wall till it reaches my door. My door swings open, and I assume she really, all I saw was the shadow was no longer there, but the shadow disappears, through the door basically, and then the door slams shut behind it.
Okay.
And at that, I was no longer asleep. At that point, I was awake. From that time I last opened my eyes to that door slamming, that was awake.
Yeah. I can envision it in my head, and there's so many layers to that, and it sounds so vivid and extreme that you can remember it so well, and you have all these details of it. Did you write it down like after it happened?
No.
Oh, really?
I'm lucky enough that I had friends that, we would talk about paranormal things, and it was something, I was able to talk about. And so I think because it was something I was able to talk about, and because it was such an extreme, honestly terrifying like experience, it just kind of stuck.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. So the first thing I want to ask you is, in your estimation, do you think this was a projection of the subconscious, some kind of, just something that was entirely internal to you? Or do you feel that this was some kind of contact with an external being, entity, something like that? Just something completely outside of yourself interacting with you in a state outside of your waking life?
I feel like it was something outside of myself.
I would tend to agree with you. I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but yeah, and that there's so many similar, not similar in like event, similar, but just the intensity of it and the interactions I have heard other people experience in a similar way, but the dreams weren't the same, but the pouring of anger, the fear of the entity, like that is not something that is totally uncommon.
Right.
Especially when it comes to uh, entities interacting with people in their dreams. Um, have you ever in your life ever done anything with magic, occultism, the esoteric at all? Just out of
Yes.
curiosity, you have. Okay. Do you mind talking about that at all?
No, I can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, please.
So when I've always been fascinated in paranormal things. Mainly for me, it was I don't know how to call it 'cause it's not exactly like cryptozoology, but it's like just creatures in general. But like when I say that, it's in a very very broad sense, meaning even things that are like completely non-physical beings,
So like
like including demons or angels or things like that.
so like mythology.
Yeah,
Okay.
mythology.
Yeah.
Um, and then I had my stepdad actually has a degree in religions, and so I would it was I would get to learn about a lot of different things. Um, but no, for me, so when I got into doing things with the paranormal, it kind of all came from looking at these other beings and things like that. And so kind of my first real introduction, other than the I think every teenager at some point gets that little bit of oh, this is witchcraft thing. You maybe don't do anything with it, or you do something with it. But other than that, like initial little thing for me, it was looking into things about otherworldly creatures. So like I looked up things about like goetic demons and things like that. And I didn't do anything too crazy with that, but it was like looking at it was something that was of interest to me.
Yeah,
And then
I can definitely identify with that because before I ever started getting into magic, I mean, I wanted to. I had an intense draw to like the Lesser Key of Solomon and the Goetia and traditional ceremonial magic, and I think one of the things that drew me to it in the first place was the actual images, the illustrated Goetia. So that I can
right.
definitely identify with.
And so I got to thinking, because I you look at this stuff and there's all these rituals and all these precise seals and little there's a whole lot of very specific methods to things. And so at some point I started thinking, how do the specific methods work? What is it about the specific methods that you know they're the thing that people pass on? And I came to, for me personally, this sort of idea that the rituals, the symbols, the methods, like all of that stuff, it's only, and this is just what I came to as a conclusion, so I'm not going to say I know completely or other people are wrong, but that they're there only to help be a focus for you internally, in order to focus your will, focus your intent onto the thing you're trying to do. And so I started trying to do this thing where I would try to not have that sort of layer that needed that focus, so to speak, where it would be automatic. I guess kind of a way to think about it is like just having yourself left open, which I think on one hand it does help to do things, if you're able to get your mind in that free space where you don't need those focuses. But at the same time, I think looking back at it now, I kind of feel like part of the reason we have those focuses and those spells and those rituals is not just because it helps you focus, but also because it lets you shut yourself off after you're done. And so a little part of me now looking back wonders if some of this stuff didn't happen because I was doing stuff like that and trying to keep myself open to, the other dimensions, so to speak.
I mean, that's a fascinating theory. And I definitely think that will and intent and sort of keeping your gates open, so to speak, that is a part of it. And I have known people who have done something similar and gotten contact with something. It may not have been what they were trying to contact or what they were intending to, but just the fact that they allowed anything to come in, I mean, it worked. And that's fascinating because I don't think you didn't mention that during the Strange Familiars interview, did you?
No.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So if you would ask me, yeah, those two things are linked. That whole experience with the Boo Hag and any kind of, esoteric activities that you were up to, it was definitely linked. And I think that's kind of where, for someone who doesn't because I'm learning how to do Solomonic magic, and it's a lot. It's really, really complicated, and it's long, and it's arduous, and it takes a very, very dedicated mind to complete all of the tasks necessary. And you may never even you may not get a successful operation even after all that.
Right.
And so I definitely feel that will and intent is a part of it. I think that the actions of the spirit are the main component, but I don't think it's alone, and I don't think it could do it entirely on its own. I think you do have to have some openness to it for it to manifest in your life. So,
right.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Were there any other dreamlike encounters that you had after that?
I can't remember if it was after or before. It was all so I've always had weird dreams, like really, really always. Like from the time I was a little kid. And so I would normally have what like people probably would describe as nightmares, but for me they were normal dreams,
Would you say it was kind of like a nightmare, but you just weren't like afraid?
Kind of.
Because I've had that where I've kind of had what I consider to be dreams, and then when I describe them to people, they say like, "Oh, well, that's horrible. Like that, I would hate that." I'm like, "Well, I mean, like I didn't feel any kind of bad vibes from it. Like, yeah, it was weird, but I didn't feel fear during it. So I can understand if it's something like that. I definitely understand that.
So a lot of like my more frightening dreams would be things like there would be something after me or after my family, and we're there, and it's like it's never the same exact thing, but like looking back on it, it's something that's not completely with form. It's like something shadowy, like almost formless, I guess. But
Yeah.
it's kind of like when I had those dreams, there was a part of me that was afraid, and there was a part of me that knows it's a dream, but at the same time, there's a part of me that always, and I'm going to say no because it's kind of a stronger feeling than thinks, but knows that it also wasn't completely just a dream,
Like an intuitive sense.
Yeah. And so I didn't feel like I was really in any danger, but it was still something terrifying. It did still feel like it was something more substantial than just a dream. But getting into more specific stuff, because some of the there was more memorable one. There's a couple actually when it was about the same time period. So there's one, and I was there in the dream, and something happened. Just something happened, and like everything in the area around me was just like completely desolated. And I kind of like, again, it was like that woke up in my dream sort of thing. But when I woke up, I was sitting nearby, a friend of mine's house who's, kind of in the area, but I'm sitting there. He kind of lives like off in the middle of nowhere from, the town, but it's still nearby, it's like a 30-minute drive. So I wake up there, and there's this figure behind me. And it's another one of those odd things where I shouldn't have been able to see from this angle, but I see this figure behind me, and the figure looks just like a silhouette of me. And it says something like, "It's time to go." And I say, I just need to make sense of it. I'm trying to make sense of it. I need to figure it out. And, shortly after that, the dream ended, and I don't know why, but that dream always felt like something that was massively important. It's the first time I've ever seen something like that too, where it was like a silhouette of me. It was another me talking to me, and it was really bizarre. But the other one that was really bizarre dream wise was I'm on this hilltop, and I'm looking out over the city, and it's this big city, and I have this feeling that I'm in somebody else's dream. And I've had a couple other dreams like that, but they're never, anything substantial. It's just kind of like, hanging out and floating around in my dream or their dream, like, but this one was different because I'm looking over at this big city. And like I said, I have this feeling that I'm in somebody else's dream. And then there's this voice behind me, and this voice behind me says, "Do it." And I focus really hard, and I don't know why I did this, but I did, just because I was told do it. And I start making it rain fire from the sky in this dream. And it just all this, like, these flaming fireballs, flaming rocks, falling from the sky onto this city. And it was this feeling like I destroyed somebody else's dream. And I wake up afterwards and like just had this horrible feeling.
That's really powerful. That idea of being able to destroy someone else's dream. That I've actually never. It's surprising that I've never heard that as a concept before. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, but I woke up and I felt awful. Like I felt like dirty and used, and I didn't know what was going on. I was trying to figure it out, what the hell happened, but it was this weird sense that like I knew I was in somebody else's dream, and I knew for some reason there was this other thing that made me destroy it. And it was just this sense I could never, get away from with that dream.
Yeah, that I can definitely see how that would like stay with you for a while. That's crazy. I'm that's very interesting, Alex. I don't know what else to say about that, because that's such a interest. Like that's honestly a foreign concept to me. The idea of being able to destroy someone else's dream. I mean, I've had dreams where I've also had a lifetime of weird dreams. I didn't start writing them down or kind of like finding any kind of importance to them until a couple weeks ago, actually. But one thing that I was experiencing a while ago was I felt like I was having a bunch of weird dreams, but it felt like I was living someone else's life. And and I do feel like it was tied to some of the magic I had been doing. But it kind of felt like I was being shown, like someone was trying to show me their life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't quite know what to make of that. It's died down. My dreams have kind of gone back to the weird, wacky, surrealist ones that I've always had. But yeah, I didn't destroy anyone's dream.
Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
But yeah, also around this time period, this was really this was all again that time period where I kind of was in that mindset of I was just leaving myself open. But I also had I feel like they were shadow people, but I never actually saw them, but I could hear them.
Okay.
And, I'd be like laying in bed at night and I would hear the sounds of something walking around my room, and like not just like one thing, like four or five things, like like people walking around my room. But I would look and there'd be nothing there. I could turn on my light and there would be nothing there, and it was just this, but I could hear it. And this wasn't like I'd wake up from a dream or something. This would be like I'm in bed trying to go to sleep, and I shut my light off and I lay down, and about 2 minutes after it's dark, I start hearing people walking around my room with nobody up there. It actually was really weird because that room was above the living room. So my bedroom was on the second floor, the living room was directly under it, and I'd be there hanging out, with like if my parents were like gone for the weekend or go and doing something, I'd have a bunch of friends over, and all of us, and I mean like all of us, would be in the living room in the middle of the night, and we would just hear footsteps. It's like somebody walking around in the room upstairs, but there was nobody there. And that wasn't like one-off kind of thing. Like that would happen periodically, where we would just hear like somebody was walking around upstairs, but we could never find anybody. One of my friends did stay with us, and he said he had some more kind of intense things than I did, but he said he had something throw a glass at him one time. He was in the room next to mine, but he would say he periodically, would see little figures, like not little figures, but like shadowy figures walking around. But I could never see them, but I could hear them.
Okay. And these were all like you were awake, or like this is just in
These
your.
were all awake.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Did they ever? Did you ever like have shadow people come like to you while you were sleeping, or like in your dreams?
Only like I said that one time where it was like that silhouette, behind me
Mm-hmm.
saying you need to go or we need to go, something like that.
Oh, so it was kind of
And
like warning
yeah,
you, or like
when I say
protecting
it was
you.
like a silhouette form of me, it was like me, my shape, but completely featureless and black.
Okay. That sounds almost kind of like a higher guardian angel, or like a personal daemon in
Right.
some senses. Now that's interesting on a couple things. Episode 9 of Strange Dominions, we interviewed actually a very good friend of mine who is an occultist, and he actually kind of created his own magical system. And it's on the left-hand path, but it's different than just a standard like satanic practice. And the way that he actually got started and kind of formed this practice was that he was having shadow people visit him at night when he was a kid. And he says in the interview that he was very scared for the first few times, but then he kind of had this feeling like they weren't there to hurt him, that they were there to like teach him or guide him. And so he basically just laid there one night, waited for them to come, and started asking them questions and began to build this almost reciprocal relationship with these shadow entities in which he has formed his magical practice. And so with what you were saying, it almost feels like I'm trying to build this theory, and it's very early stages, but I'm wondering if the entities that people encounter in these dreams, even though they seem terrifying and scary, if maybe that's just how we perceive them, and they are trying to communicate with us in some way in a non-threatening way, but we just that's how it comes across to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could see that. I I think there's probably some of that. Me personally, just personally, I do feel like there are some things that are completely, like, let's say completely malevolent, but I also feel like it's not necessarily every paranormal, you know, encounter like that, or that it could just be, some of these things, or even a lot of these things, even the majority are things that it's just because our animal brain can't process it quite right, and so because we can't process it quite right, it's something that is just scary to us.
Right, exactly. And I think that our perception plays a lot into what kind of nature we assign to these kind of things.
Right.
Um, a lot of the people that I know that practice traditional Goetia magic, one of the things that they say is that the both the spirits that people that are kind of called demons, and even the angels that people communicate with, they are not anything close to how the mainstream religion would describe them as far as like their nature. They don't come across as full of hatred and malevolence. They're kind of this ambiguous thing that don't really want to be here. And that's kind of why when you do that kind of ritual, it takes so much energy to get them here, is because they don't want to be here. It's uncomfortable for them. They don't like it. They want to get out of here as fast as possible. And so a lot of people tend to become surprised when they do this kind of stuff and they realize, oh, okay, so maybe this idea that I had and this idea that society has of what one would call a demon, it's much more dogmatic than what is actually happening, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, yeah, that's very interesting. Do the shadow people, or like we'll call it the formless activity, does that still happen?
No, so that's interesting because the thing that stopped it was actually when I got my python. Which it's interesting because one of the things about primitive man was large python worship, and the idea of large pythons as like a protector kind of thing, was this thing here,
Of
like
course. I mean, South
they're
America, that's a huge part of their culture. Like
yeah.
the
So
pre-Christian South American religions and cultures, snakes were very deified.
and I actually had a reticulated python. I'm going to go ahead and say, if you have not done a lot of research and you do not have a plan for what to do after, if you don't have a backup plan for if you can no longer take care of that reticulated python, you should not get a reticulated python. You need to plan everything out, and you need to plan eventualities, because I know some people just get one because they're like, oh, look, it's a big snake, and they don't realize it's a big snake that's going to get way, 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 way bigger. And I had a friend that I had multiple friends that had large pythons, and knew how to take care of them, and had already had the experience with them, and I had somebody that could take over for my large python if I was no longer able to. And you need to have that stuff planned out if you have them. Which I loved having her, but I do want to put that out there, because you shouldn't pick up a large snake like that willy-nilly. But when I got her and I kept her in enclosure in my room, that's when the stuff all stopped.
Okay, that's very interesting. Especially actually, my friend Kane, the guy who I was talking about, who kind of learned his magical practice from the shadow people he was encountering, he has snakes.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're pythons. I just know that they're snakes.
Right.
So yeah, that's very interesting. I actually, I had an experience, an actual psychedelic experience with snakes. I was one of the trips that I had that was very terrifying but very beneficial to me, and it pretty much changed my life. It completely changed how I looked at the world. But one of the most vivid like closed-eyed visions I had while I was going through like the worst of it was this massive python essentially just coming towards me. It was like the area it was in was totally black. And it was coming towards me. It wasn't moving forward. It was just making the forward motions, but it was staying still. And for some reason that visual really stayed with me. And it ended up leading me into a couple different things that I'm involved with now. But I had no relation to snakes. I mean, I thought they were cool, but like they weren't like if someone had asked me before that, "What's your favorite animal?" It would never be a snake. It'd be something like a wolf or something like that. Um, but I have become intensely interested in the the imagery and the lore of snakes from sort of a non-Abrahamic stance, like the more pagan, the more polytheistic religions and how they interact with snakes. I find that to
Right.
be very interesting.
Um, Now you said it looked like it was coming towards you, but like it wasn't moving.
Yeah, it was like
Like it wasn't slithering, but it was still coming at you in a straight line, kind of.
no, it was writhing. That's the thing. It was like writhing,
Oh,
but it wasn't moving closer to me.
oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
So yeah, it was like making the left and right motions with its whole body, but it was doing it entirely in place. And I mean, I had my eyes closed for a while because I got, when you're on mushrooms, time doesn't exist. So it feels like forever. And I'm staring at this thing and I'm trying to take it in as much as possible because even as much of a bad time as I was having, I felt this weird, like, calling towards it. Like I need to analyze every inch of this being because it's there for a reason.
Right.
So yeah, I still don't really know what to make of it. I mean, I've done some research into it, but snakes are very interesting, and it's interesting to see how they were perceived from an ancient standpoint and not a modern one, because the view of them is very different.
Right.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to mention as far as like stories or
Um.
dreams or occult activities?
So because you brought it up, I'll mention this one thing that happened. So you brought up something similar. There was that wrong spot in the woods that I talked about on Strange Familiars.
Yes.
But just to catch people up here, so it was this spot in the woods where it was at the end of this sort of you know, what do you call it? Walkway, to a nature walk kind of thing, made of wood to a pier at the end,
Mm-hmm.
going into the creek. And on the opposite side of the creek, there was this wrong spot. And everybody that went out there, the first time they went out there, and usually, other times too, but like the first time everyone went out there, they would get drawn staring at this wrong spot, and it just made people feel uncomfortable, and it just felt wrong.
Yeah.
And so the only hallucinogens I've ever done, I say hallucinogens, I guess maybe psychedelics is a better way to put it. I don't know.
It's an interchange. I mean, you could say entheogens, whatever you want.
I say things in anyway, that's the word I'm used to using, but was salvia.
Okay.
And that's where I had used salvia for the first time. And one of the things that happened to me was you know in in my trip, I'm kind of there, and then all of a sudden I'm not there. And there were some other, little crazy stuff going on, but the big thing with that spot was I got to where I was on a boat, and it was the middle of the night. Like, it was completely dark out, except when I, actually was there, it was sort of like dusk, like early dusk, where it's still bright. And I'm on this ship, this big ship, and it just has this nice, clean, perfect cut down the middle. And it starts sinking, of course, because it's a ship that just got cut clean in half somehow. and it starts sinking, and the water touches me. And when the water touches me, it felt like something was grabbing me and just pulling me, and like it was pulling me. And, I'm fighting it and I'm struggling for a while and it's freaking me out. And I come out of it. And, the people I'm there with tell me that, like, they're like, well, what happened? They're telling me basically it was like, I was getting pulled in. They're like, it was like you were getting pulled, in towards the creek. And, that would have been the direction of the wrong spot. And it was just this kind of feeling where it was like, it almost felt like when I did that there, like the wrong spot there was trying to pull me into it.
That's fascinating. That is really, really interesting. I've never done salvia. I know someone who actually has tried multiple times to do it, and they have done it, but they've never actually like tripped from it. Like they've never got like any kind of reaction. And but the fact that it kind of like integrated itself with this wrong spot in the woods. Have you been there since?
I've been to the pier that's, on the other side of the wrong spot. I've never been to the actual wrong spot. It's actually on across the creek is the property of the military base here.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna go
Yeah,
over
no,
there
no,
and
no. I
mess with
totally
that.
understand that.
But I've been out to that other, to just the pier or the woods there, nearby it. Generally speaking, I'm not worried about being near it. It's just more of a I wouldn't want to go there and I wouldn't want to feed it attention.
No, yeah, I completely understand that.
So I have this friend who he's the friend actually that was staying with us that said he saw the shadowy things and had something throw a glass at him. But his family's been in this area for a very long time. They actually got like some kind of letter from the governor about like recognizing their family as being one of the families that's been in North Carolina for however long, like just they've been here forever. But he would talk about paranormal stuff and we would talk about stuff, and just for whatever reason, like that spot, like he did not like talking about it at all. And like if anybody brought it up or he caught anybody staring, he'd be like, don't look at it, don't look at it, don't talk about it, you just ignore it and you go on with what you're doing. And he was just kind of always like that about that spot. And he would say there's just some things like that that you just don't pay attention to, because something about it wants something out of you and you just ignore it and you go on with what you're doing and you just don't give it the chance, basically.
Yeah, I can understand that because the woods that I had the last two mushroom trips in, and both of them were terrible. They were like ostensibly bad trips. They didn't really get bad until I went into this one area, and you kind of have to get through this area to get back to the neighborhood. But this one area, the second I started to go through it and look around, the any positive feelings I was having completely drained. I got the heart palpitations, I started sweating, and my mind just started, the thought loops, and just like every aspect of a bad trip you've ever heard, that's what I experienced. And it started when I would go through this one part of the trail through through these woods. But in this area, the trees are very small and they're kind of gnarled and they're just not very pleasant looking. And but there's like there's an air in that little area that really, it feels, I hate using the word malevolent because I try and look at these things as objectively as possible and not mix my subjective view into it. But
Right.
I just didn't feel like I was supposed to be there, or it didn't want me there, or it was trying to hurt me, or I don't know. I can't really give much of an explanation for why it kind of triggered this bad experience in me, but it did, and it's done it twice, and I no longer live near there. So, but so
Right.
the concept of a wrong spot and it affecting you and not wanting to talk about it, and like I can identify with that.
But yeah, that was a weird, weird area, and it actually wasn't that far off from my house either. The the creek and the area, leading up to the creek and everything like that, that wasn't too far off. That was like a 5, maybe 10 minute walk. It was like right there.
Right.
So I wonder sometimes if there's not a connection with like the Hag with that area too.
Oh, there definitely
Um,
could be. Have you looked into like the history of that area, and then if there's been any kind of like, you know, if there's folklore surrounding that area?
so this is a really, really weird area because it's a military town, and you get a lot of transient traffic. So, and you also get a lot of transient traffic that's tied to the military. So when you're in the military, or even if you're just like, the wife or kid of, somebody, like you saying you like saw this weird stuff or this weird thing happen, like that could affect your career, or, your family member's career. So a lot of people, even if they have these encounters, don't say much about it in any kind of official capacity. So it's really, really hard to find any kind of information about it on the area. There, there is another really kind of creepy, really interesting thing about the area, that there was this bridge here. It was just like a little bridge, like to go over the creek. It's a little nothing bridge, but um, so I'd always heard, because I'd only been here a few years at the time before they got rid of it, um, that there was, a good amount of people that would, drive off the bridge, like not on purpose, like, but they would just drive off the bridge, and they would die. And the water there isn't very deep, and the speed isn't very high. And so, like, imagining basically everybody that goes off of this bridge dying is kind of like a weird concept. But my friend that had been in the area for a long time, he told me that there's actually been like a lot of them, and not only is there a lot of them, but the really weird part is they're all like very religious people. Like
Okay.
most of them were like a pastor, or like a priest or something. And it
Interesting.
was really weird because he used to say, in his kind of weird, like half joking, half serious way, he's like, yeah, he's like, the creek likes, that holy man blood, but it was really weird. They ended up taking it down, and it's really sad. I like the week before they took it down, this one girl drove off of it and died, and I actually, knew her from high school, but she of course, like she wasn't, a priest or a preacher, but her family was known for being, one of the very religious families in the area. And it was, it was really sad that she died, but it was also like really kind of like having heard what I'd heard about it, a little extra creepy to me.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I mean, that's a very, I mean, it's super sad. I'm sorry to hear that. But with everything that happened to that bridge prior, I can definitely understand how that would be. Like, there's definitely a creepy element to that entire story.
But yeah, I don't know. I, I kind of look at things with a kind of animist like view,
Yeah,
and I
I
just
do
feel
too.
like some things, even if they don't always start off with a spirit, they build a spirit sometimes. And it kind of fit to feel like, that bridge had, that bad spirit to it, so to speak, from my view, bad spirit. But and it did feel a little bit like that was its last, lashing out.
Well, it's very, what I think about when because there are areas that may not have had like a long history of weird occurrences happen, and they could have just sort of started one day. And it is possible that somehow it formed a spirit attached to this area, or the area itself has a an intelligence to it. But I always think about how, like, how many spirits may exist just all around you, and like ones that we have no context of, no understanding of, that if there was ever a culture that was aware of a certain spirit, that it got wiped out and no one ever wrote the history down, so now we just don't have those stories anymore. We have no way of knowing about it, and it could very easily, find a home somewhere and begin to act out. And all of a sudden, you have this area that for most of its existence was a totally normal area, and then all of a sudden, this weird stuff started happening to it. And I was thinking about this the other day about, you know, what would happen if, and I think this is also where my interest in kind of seeing where the occult and the paranormal intersect. If someone does any kind of ritual or magical working, what kind of energy does that draw, and how long does that energy stay there?
Right.
And so I also feel like that is a possible explanation, but I also agree that some of these places can kind of build a spirit of their own.
Yeah, I could see that.
So we're about to wrap up here. Just out of curiosity, I mean, do you still do anything with magic or the occult, or is that more something that you did before and don't really do much anymore?
It's very limited if I do. These days I kind of lean much more heavily into Zen.
Okay.
And so I don't do too much to directly affect things. It's kind of, but I don't avoid it either. It's Zen is an odd thing. You don't do things for the sake of doing things, but you also don't not do things for the sake of doing things. And it's kind of, sometimes I might find myself, thinking about it or pulled into doing, small things here or there, but I don't try actively to do things.
It's not like a regular thing.
Sounds like a what?
It's not like a regular thing you do. It's just something that kind of, you do it when you do it. And
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay. I can understand that. Well, Alex, I want to thank you so much. This has been really, really interesting, and all these stories, they're really fascinating. And if anything else happens, please reach out. I'd love to have you on again.
All right, I will.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
And that was my discussion with Alex. I really enjoyed talking with Alex, and I thought a lot of his stories were really interesting and had a lot of comparisons to some of the other guests we've had on the show. So with that, I'm Octavian Graves. This is Strange Dominions. Have a great night.